how to approach this, and I decided what I would do is just talk about the parasites that we seem to deal with most around here, and we'll just kind of talk about them one at a time. And so this isn't comprehensive. It's just what I think is the most useful information for producers around here. So last spring, when Pat and I came, I had brought this book, and I told you this is a good general book, and it still is. So if you don't have this book, this is a good one to have.
Is that the storybook?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's not again, it's an overview on some things, and so a lot of the things that they cover in this book you could do with a little more detail, but it's a pretty good. In fact, it's the best kind of general book that I've run across. So last night, as I decided to just get everything written down, this is how I organized my outline. This is.
We only need one for our family.
Okay. And so this is how we'll go through things. So one thing that is kind of I think important to know, and I was going to kind of talk about this in more detail, but I think that it's not useful to go into a whole lot more detail, and it's the taxonomy of these different organisms, and sometimes it helps to know a little bit about groups of animals because they have characteristics in common. But these parasites are what they call polyphyletic. It means they come from all different taxa. They come from lots of different areas, and many of them are unrelated, and so we're not going to worry too much about that. Although it'll help to understand that there's a difference between many groups of invertebrates, and some of these are insects. So we've got arachnids and insects and invertebrates and lots of different organisms. So let's kind of start out with internal parasites, and you'll notice that I wrote first of all the barber pole worm, which is probably the most common stomach worm that we have around here. And it's called barber pole. The Latin name is Homuncus contortus. And that's because the worm, they call it barber pole because it has these red stripes, but it's also sort of a spiral shaped worm. And I'm always watching for it. And I don't know that I've ever seen one, because sometimes I'll get in my water trough, and when I dump it out, I'll look in that water to see what's in the water. And sometimes I find these maybe 3/4 of a centimeter long, kind of white worm-looking things, and I think it's bird feces is what I'm seeing. I'm always worried that I'm going to find barber pole worms in the water, but I don't. But I do know that we've got problems with barber pole worms in New Mexico because in antelope we did a study a few years ago. Actually, we didn't do the study. It was a group from Texas, but we gave it permission in New Mexico, and they collected a bunch of antelope. The barber pole worms accumulate in the fourth chamber of the stomach, the abomasum, and they found our antelope just full of them. So they're prevalent and they're around, and again they're bloodsuckers, and that's why they are harmful. They make these animals, they make our sheep anemic, and so as far as stomach worms go, they're our most important, and they can be dealt with easily with the parasitic ivermectin, and we'll talk about some others here. So let's go from there down to the brown worm, which in many places is a bigger problem than barber pole. But I don't think we have a big problem with brown worms. I don't hear much about them. I don't see them being diagnosed much around New Mexico. And if we do have them, they can be treated the same way as barber pole worms. So with these stomach worms, they're always worse when you put your animals out on a dewy, damp field, a pasture. And that's because, do you know about that life cycle and the role of snails? Snails pick up the larvae, and then when it's nice and wet and your pasture's green and lush in the summer mornings and dew-covered, the snails, these invertebrates with the larvae in them, crawl up the stems of your grasses, and then the sheep, cattle, your livestock eat that grass, and that's how they become infected.
So they're laying eggs on it?
No, the
They're
snails,
eating the
they're eating the snails.
Oh.
They get these invertebrates along with the grass, and so that's how they get infected. And of course, that's how the antelope are getting them.
Are you saying that snails carry the worm?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Carry the larva. Yeah. Yeah, and snails are a common intermediate host for a lot of these stomach worms. So if you're raising your sheep and you have a nice lush irrigated green pasture, then this is something you have to watch for. If you have your sheep just on open range, unirrigated native grasses in New Mexico, you probably don't have as much to worry about.
Do you think if you purchase alfalfa hay, you're seeing many worms from that?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that things are gone and dead by the time you get your alfalfa. Yeah, I don't worry too much about alfalfa. And I've never read that they're transmitted through alfalfa, through baled hay.
Because, I mean, you find stones and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering
yeah,
whether the snails would have gotten
Yeah.
picked up in that.
Yeah, and I think they do, but I think they're dead.
Okay,
I think they're dead.
so
by
the
time.
larva doesn't survive in
No,
a snail,
no.
okay.
No. If it's dry or if it's on the pasture,
Right.
where they can crawl back down into the soil, then they survive.
Yeah.
But not in the hay. So as far as stomach worms, that barber pole is the biggest one you have to worry about. And then there's tapeworms. And I don't know how big a problem tapeworms are. I don't know. But there's this one tapeworm, and I've written it down, Echinococcus granulosa. That has, and I mention this because this has been a bad problem. So when I decided to go to graduate school and enrolled at Brigham Young University, I had to take this class called, I think it was like Introduction to Graduate School or something. And the guy that taught it was a parasitologist. And he was teaching us things like how to write and how to make your scientific slides and stuff like that. But his research had been parasites, and specifically Echinococcus granulosa. And so that's a type of tapeworm, and there are some other tapeworms. And the problem with Echinococcus granulosa in particular is that an intermediate host or an accidental host are dogs. Well, carnivores can be a cat, but dogs, foxes are the biggest problem.
We had a dog that had it one time.
Yeah, and they get these what they call hydatid cysts.
Oh.
And that's caused from the larva of these tapeworms. Now, there are some other kinds of tapeworms, and in wildlife, I've run across tapeworm cysts that are in the layers of muscle, but they're little tiny watery cysts. Probably not a whole lot. The biggest ones are like the size of my finger in the muscle. But I've seen bigger ones in the liver. And in the liver, when I see these hydatid cysts, they're under pressure. When you break one, you can get sprayed in the face with those cysts. And with Echinococcus granulosa, I've seen pictures of those cysts, and they can be like that big around, and they're watery.
In muscle?
Yes,
They're
in muscle, and also they can't get in among the organs,
Okay.
into the peritoneal cavity among the organs. Now, the big problem with those is that you can get them, people can get them. And so this parasitologist that I knew, Dr. Anderson, his research had been on Echinococcus granulosa among the Navajos. And so the dogs would pick up the eggs from the fecal material of the sheep, and then they would get the tapeworms, and then all of the children playing with the dogs would then get the tapeworms. And so the Navajo people were getting hydatid disease, and it was a terrible thing. And so that was his research, and that was the problem that he worked on. And I mention that so you can be aware of it, mostly to be aware to keep track of your dogs. And when you see tapeworms in the fecal material of your dogs, you need to get your dogs dewormed to protect yourselves. That's the big thing. So I don't know, with all of these parasites, with all of these worms, if the load becomes too heavy, then it can become heavy enough to be detrimental to the sheep, and especially in the case of lambs, can lead to mortality. But there's also a level of a parasite load where in a sheep that can be at equilibrium. So they're carrying parasites, and we hate the thoughts of that, but sometimes it's not such a bad idea or a bad deal if your sheep have parasites and they're dealing with them on their own, they're living with them, and so they're at what I kind of call an equilibrium. So I've sheared sheep for the martyrs. For Katie, I've sheared sheep, and you've seen those shears I used from New Zealand. And so the guy that manufactures those keeps merinos in New Zealand. And he told me that some years ago, he decided he was just done with anti-parasite drugs. He was just done with drugs altogether. And so he just quit cold turkey and let the sheep that were going to be affected, he just let them die. And he said it was really a hard thing to do and a heartbreaking thing to do, but over the course of a couple generations, his whole flock is sort of at an equilibrium, and he doesn't use any parasite control at all. And I'm not advocating it. I'm just telling you that that's an approach that some people are beginning to take with this.
But the Gulf Coast natives and the Florida cracker sheep have developed a resistance to parasites, living and adapting
Yeah.
down there. So,
That's right. So they've done on their own. So I would guess, we call it parasite resistance, but I would guess that they're at an equilibrium, and they've done the same thing that Richard Watson's merinos did in New Zealand. So those that are going to be affected drop out of the flock or out of the population, and those that can deal with it survive.
It's an interesting way to call things out.
Yeah, it is. It can be awful to watch.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to watch.
Is the only parasite on here that you listed that humans can get are the tapeworms, or can we get the rest of them also?
I don't think we're affected by barber pole worms, those kind of worms, but the tapeworms we are. And there are some other worms, whipworms that we see in carnivores. Whipworms we get, pinworms can be passed between species, but they're not as big a problem in sheep. And so to protect yourselves, when you're come in from dealing with sheep, wash your hands, and then I suggest you're more careful with your dogs and your cats. Just keep your eye on dogs and cats, because they're a greater risk, I think, to you than your sheep directly. So, if you suspect worms in your flock, the most obvious symptom is diarrhea, scours. That's what you see probably first, and that's more obvious. They list anemia, and so I just wanted to say a little bit about anemia, because I'm seeing a lot of people talk about the FAMASA testing, and so that's a regulated test. I didn't know too much about it, but you look at the tissue of the eyelid, underneath the eyelid, and you compare the color of that. And so the whiter it becomes, the more anemic the animal is. And so sheep people have known for forever to watch those tissues to see them becoming pale. And that's an indication of worms. But the FAMASA has categorized, but to get the card, you have to go through the training. And I think you can do it online, and then you can get the card. And so that's something that you can do at home.
And that's a card that has the colors.
Yeah, with the colors. And I've never done that. I've done it with the irises of sandhill cranes. They come in different colors. And there's a card, and you can record these different colors of the iris of those cranes.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done it with cranes, and that's because that's studies of genetics for those, but it can apply to worms and eyelids. So if you're interested, you can do that online. I don't trust that very much. I think there's a lot of variation, but if you're way at one end of the scale with that FAMASA test, then that's a good indication that you've got a worm load in your flock. So anemia, scours, and I also want to mention bottle jaw, because I've seen that. In fact, I had bottle jaw in the ewe years ago, and I don't really know whether that ewe was getting bottle jaw and I didn't notice it, or whether it sort of got really bad really fast. I don't know. Now, do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about bottle jaw?
I have, you get bottle jaw.
Bottle jaw, you know? Okay, so right here they'll swell up, and the profile of their head, I mean their nose, it'll be like they lose their jawline.
It's not like a goiter, because sheep can get, they can get goiters, but that's not a bottle jaw.
No, it's
Bottle
the
jaw
bottle.
is long like this way.
So when you steep out bottle jaw, you know you're getting towards the end of that sheep's life if you don't do something when you see bottle jaw. And the reason I bring that up, I hadn't seen bottle jaw for a long time, and I sheared some alpacas at a place, and I kind of, when I was done, I hadn't paid much attention, and he wanted to show me something. We were looking at the feet, I think, of these alpacas, and I looked at that one alpaca, and it looked like bottle jaw, and I wasn't sure if alpacas had that, because I don't know that much about those animals, but they do. And so that animal was in the beginning stages of bottle jaw, and we treated it, and I saw it a couple of weeks later, and it was reducing. Now, when I had bottle jaw, did you treat your bottle jaw? Did,
I was kind of in denial of it because I had no problems with any other sheep in my flock, one sheep. I mean, because I had a friend that
Yeah,
gave me some
yeah,
sheep that
right.
came from a place, then somebody told me that they did have bottle jaw at that place.
uh-huh.
So that group of sheep is what brought that bottle jaw in there, and she was the only one that got it.
Yeah,
And I probably waited too long, I was in denial of it.
Yeah.
And when I did finally treat her, I think it overloaded her system and she bloated and died.
yeah. So when I treated, the one case I ever had, when I treated it with ivermectin, it disappeared really fast, like over the course of 3 or 4 days.
Mine didn't go away, I think she had it really bad.
Yeah, so when you see that, you either need to let the sheep go, put it down, or treat it fast. So there's, if, like in dogs, you can see problems in their fleece, in their coats. So you might run across brittle wool, bleached wool, or wool with a break in it. Can indicate lots of things, but it could indicate parasites as well. It could indicate when you've got a break in your wool. It could indicate that you had an illness. I brought a ram in a few years ago. Brought a ram in, and I decided I put it in with my other rams too. Put it in with the other rams, and I was watching it real close because I wasn't sure how bad the scuffing was going to be. And I turned my head, didn't see it happen, turned back, and that new ram was slabbed out on the ground. So I had one ram, it had a little bit of a scur, and so it had hit that other ram in the head with its horn, and it was down. It was dead. It was dead. But I revived it. I got it CPR. I got it back.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, when
On its temple it hit?
I don't know.
Oh, you didn't see.
No, I didn't see it. Don't know where it hit.
Wow.
But it was dead. And then you know how they have that they call it agonal breathing, where they take those last deep breaths. It was at that point by the time I got over there. Anyway, I CPR'd, I pumped on it, and I'd get done, and it would take one of those agonal breaths and stop. And I kept doing it until one time it took 2 breaths, then 3 breaths, and then within 15 minutes it was breathing on its own. Anyway, what I did then was I treated it with Banamine and isolated it, and it lived. It lived.
Mm-hmm.
But when I shared it that fall, there was a bad break in the wool coat from that experience. So what I'm saying is, when you have a break in your fleece, it doesn't necessarily mean worms, but worms can do that. Pot belly. So like in dogs, you can get pot belly, and that's just a belly full of worms. And a pot belly is when that animal looks pregnant, but when you feel the muscle mass, it's like skinny everywhere else. And so it's not fat, it's just got this big belly, and so that can indicate worms. I don't see that very often, but
Most of those are roundworms, though,
yeah.
in most cases.
Yeah, those are roundworms, not tapeworms. Yeah. So some other kinds of worms here I have listed are lungworms and liver flukes. I wanted to mention those because those two, they're nematodes, I think. Both lungworms. No, lungworms are a nematode, and liver flukes are different. They're a different class.
Flatworms.
Yeah, the flatworms. Yeah. So they have traditionally been a real problem in big flocks of sheep in the United States, but are especially with ivermectin, you rarely see those anymore. But lungworms used to be a big problem, and it was lungworms coming in, primarily others, but primarily lungworms that came into the western mountains on sheep then that transmitted it to the bighorn sheep. And so the crash in the bighorn sheep population in those early days was largely a result of lungworms coming in with those domestic flocks. It's not anymore because lungworms aren't as prevalent. So we still have this problem between domestic and wild sheep, but it has more to do now with the bacteria than it does with lungworms. The nice thing about lungworms is that ivermectin is so effective on lungworms, and also on with liver flukes, which you don't also see very often anymore on today's sheep. But they have been problems, and so they're a good thing to be aware of. The next internal parasite I wanted to mention is coccidia, which is a single-celled animal, just one cell. I think I can't remember if coccidia are flagellated or not. Do you know, Richard?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay. So, but they're a protozoan, and so they're a different kind of organism altogether.
Carrie, hang on a second.
Yeah.
She's got the lid off of
No,
that.
that's what he does.
Oh, never mind.
It's his job.
Okay.
Takes the lid off to get a little drink of
Oh,
Takes what's
stick his
left
little
in the
tongue in it.
bottle.
I mentioned coccidia because I see it once in a while. At least I think I see it once in a while, and so you need to be aware of it. If you've got your sheep housed in a place that might collect water vapor. So if you have an enclosed barn or an enclosed place, then you might get coccidia, and you might especially get it in the late winter, early spring when it starts to warm up, and when they've been bedded under shelter all winter long, and especially if you had a lot of bedding like straw, because that straw holds moisture, and so down beneath the top layers of straw, it can be really, really wet, and coccidia thrive in that kind of an environment. They don't do well in really cold weather like we have right now. But when it starts to warm up, they can really do well when it's cool and moist. And then the sheep get them through aerosol. They get it through water vapor, protozoan, and they also run the sheep down, do the same thing. They cause the wool to break, but mostly they cause diarrhea and inappetence, loss of appetite, and you get these sheep that just turn into poor doers when they are under a heavy load of coccidia.
They turn into what?
Coccidia.
Poor doers.
Oh.
Poor doers.
I had a batch of chickens, baby chickies that were kept in a barrel until they got old enough and it hadn't been cleaned enough. They probably hadn't been cleaned often enough and they got coccidia.
Yeah.
And I Googled it, I'm like, what the heck's going on with these chickens? And I had coccidia medicine for my sheep and it worked on the chickens. I was like,
Oh, really?
yes.
Because some birds get trichomonas.
It worked.
And
The
they're
coccidia
protozoan as
medicine
well,
fixed
yeah.
them, so I'm assuming it was.
So that's what. So did you use a coccidiostat that you just mixed in the water?
Mhm.
And I think that's the most common one, and it works pretty well. But you need to sort of be aware that if you have coccidia or you've seen it in your sheep, birds are a little different because they die fast. Sheep live a long time, but they're going to carry a coccidia load the rest of their lives.
Oh,
And in
really?
fact, most sheep are probably going to have some coccidia in their system somewhere. And so the trick for most of us is just not letting it get out of hand. So in fact, it just won't really go anywhere if they bed where it's dry and you don't have a big load of coccidia under the bedding, then you're okay.
So what do you use for bedding?
Well, some people use sand. So if you're trying to raise good wool, then I always just keep mine on the dirt. So I don't use any bedding. Yeah, I don't use bedding. But straw and sawdust with coccidia are, that's because of the nature of those two substrates, they can protect the sheep from that dampness that's down below, but they can isolate the dampness down below, and then the coccidia get in there. But also, if you're bedded in a really airy place like you have, it's not gonna be a problem. Not until you get them enclosed.
But yeah, right now, we've got so much rain that just came,
Yeah.
it's a mess down there now.
Yeah,
So it takes a while for that to dry out, but it's cold.
yeah.
I don't
It's cold.
expect to see it now.
I don't think you need to worry about it now. Then in springtime, and a fresh rain you don't worry about, but you worry about that rain that gets sequestered and kept somewhere for weeks and weeks, and doesn't get a chance to dry out, and doesn't get sunlight. That's where you get coccidia.
Is it the same with goats too?
Yeah, yes, exactly the same, And I've seen more coccidia in dairy goats, way more than I have in sheep. So yeah. Okay, so we talked about treating through natural selection. Before we go on, I should mention that coccidia is always worse when you're also crowded. And that's where I've seen it in goats, dairy goats. This one place up in Espanola, he kept a whole bunch of goats in a very small place, and he had coccidia all the time. And then I mentioned, in the notes, I mentioned that product called Corid, which is the coccidia stat that you can.
Ivermectin does not get rid of,
No,
it's a separate drug.
Yeah, separate drug. And that Corid is something you put in their drinking water for them. So if you start seeing diarrhea, then you start thinking, diarrhea in the springtime, especially early spring, you start thinking coccidia. Or an animal that's a poor doer, then you start thinking coccidia. Let's see, so one of the things that the books all mention, and it is about clean water and clean feeding. Katie have any of the rest of you ever visited Sherry Bone up at her place in Edgewood? All right, so Sherry, she's up until this year, and now her health is failing, and so is her husband's. So it's kind of not this way anymore. But she used to keep a barn that you could serve spaghetti on the floor, on the dirt floor of that barn. She raked and swept it religiously, and so there was never any manure pellets anywhere. And the books talk about that a lot. So with coccidia, with worms, with everything, the more you can reduce exposure of your animals to manure, the better off that you'll be. And you can't do that. But you can do the best you can. If you always feed on the ground, it's a good idea to do like Sherry did and get as much manure out of there as you can. I like to feed in troughs, and I knock them out, and I put the hay in the trough, and then they lift it up and throw it all over the ground anyway. What I'm saying is reduce it as much as you can. Sherry was the best I ever saw anybody do with controlling manure, and so the rest of us aren't up to her standard. So you do the best you can. And I do like, so I visited one place and I didn't say anything, but this woman had sheep, and she had someone there who was interested in sheep, and she pointed at her water trough, which was just filthy water trough, and it was full of moss and
Ugh.
had that much layer at the bottom of sediment.
Oh, wow.
And she explained to this other woman, she explained, if you get your sheep used to having clean water, then they won't drink this dirty water. So she never cleaned out a water trough.
How disgusting.
And so I would suggest that that you clean your water troughs once in a while at least.
I keep goldfish in a bunch of mine, and that helps keep
With the algae,
the algae and the larvae, and things that,
yeah,
mosquito larvae and everything.
yeah,
It works
yeah.
great if you don't have ducks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they need the fish.
So you can do that. It still helps if you don't get the sediment build up, because see, you've got these
I get a
birds.
submersible pump, I periodically clean them out.
Yeah,
Sheep, or the fish pretty much survive all that.
okay,
Goldfish are pretty tough.
yeah, they are. So I make my sheep drink all the water. And then I, when it's empty, then I brush it all out and fill it back up. So that's what I do. So, but you can handle it however you want. But it's a good idea to don't just completely ignore those two sources of contamination. All right. So I've listed some dewormers. So I would suggest that, and I do this quite often, some of these livestock supply places, veterinary supply places, and I have used the one called Valley Vet. I've used them for a long, long time. There used to be some others in business, but I've used Valley Vet a lot. But on their dewormers, read what they say about them, because they'll usually list the organisms that these different medications take care of. Very, very best is ivermectin. It's such a broad spectrum dewormer, and it's really, really safe, and it's really, really effective. And so ivermectin is a good one. I've used ivermectin a lot, and I've used that number 3, valbazen. I've used valbazen, and so I've known a lot of sheep producers that will alternate between ivermectin and valbazen. But a lot of the experts now are talking about, other integrated approaches of pest control, and you always have to be aware that when you use these deworming medications, that you might be adding to the selection for organisms that are resistant. So when I use ivermectin, I usually dose them heavy. I dose at least 1.5 times the recommended dose on the label. And I do that with ivermectin partly because ivermectin is really, really safe for livestock. You can't hurt them. So with wildlife, when we would treat wildlife, one thing we were doing is re-releasing them, and we needed to give them as good a survival chance as we could, and we were only going to get one chance to have our hands on these animals. So we would take the dose of ivermectin and we would just double it, just automatically double it, and always give them a double dose.
For sheep, do you just give it once a year, or?
I don't even do it once a year. I do it about every couple of years.
Huh.
Now, lots and lots of people that I share for do it just by the calendar, once a year. Sherry always does it once a year, and a lot of people do it. Exactly. You do it usually. Are you giving her
Every time we
when-
shear,
when we shear?
do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do.
yeah.
So we do about twice a year.
Yeah, and so at that rate, you're gonna have everything but anything that would be resistant, you're gonna have it really clean.
Yeah.
It should be really,
And then we give them their immunization at the same time.
yeah.
Carrie, is ivermectin okay for a pregnant ewe
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Yeah,
at any stage of her?
Mhm.
Okay.
I would, at those late stages of pregnancy, I wouldn't give anything. I would always hold off, anything. yeah, I was trying to think if I even give anything for milk fever, and I would, late-term pregnancy, don't give them anything, wait until they've lambed. And then after they've lambed, sometimes you'll need to treat them for either milk fever or once in a while ketosis. Ketosis might happen right around parturition, right during parturition or right after ketosis.
A worm load can precipitate that?
No, but when they're pregnant, I don't like to disrupt anything when they're pregnant.
Yeah.
And so some people think that during pregnancy, that the change in hormone balances can stimulate the worms. And so the worm load can increase during pregnancy because of the exposure of the worms to the pregnancy hormones.
Mm.
And so I would, if the ewes are late-term pregnant and you think they need to be dewormed, then I would deworm them after the lambs are born. But that's different from vaccination, remember. Now, we're in worming, that's parasites. In vaccination, you want to if you want to vaccinate and give maternal antibodies to the lambs, you want to vaccinate about 6 weeks ahead of parturition, because it takes about 3 weeks for the antibodies to develop once you immunize, once you vaccinate. And so all you're trying to do is give that mama a little boost in her antibodies, and so the babies get that. So vaccination and deworming are two different processes.
Would that be the same with goats too?
Exactly the same. All right, so I'm gonna, I had mentioned diatomaceous earth here. And so there's all kinds of testimonials, people that swear by it. And when they do scientific trials, they can't find that it has any significant effect, diatomaceous earth, on internal parasites. I've used it, I've added diatomaceous earth to feed rations. And I ran across this old rancher down in Corona. This was years ago, cattle rancher. And he was old school, and he was absolutely converted to diatomaceous earth. He said it changed everything for him. So there's a lot of testimonials, but when they do scientific trials of diatomaceous earth, they really don't find anything. So I add that because people ask about it. I have also listed diatomaceous earth under external parasites because I'm not really sure, but I think that especially with larvae, if you can get that diatomaceous earth powder on larvae, I'm pretty sure that those diatoms will, because they cut into the skin of the worms, I'm pretty sure that on the surface of the earth, when you spread it around, you can kill the larvae. So I mention that because some people will sprinkle it around the barnyard, and you know how when we did our rainy season and flies come out of everywhere, and it's because the soil becomes damp and all those larvae become active and turn into flies, and pretty soon you've got flies all over the barnyard in late August. And so I think that if you spread diatomaceous earth, you might control that a little bit.
We put it in our chicken run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't help but expect it to be pretty efficacious on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned it there. Now, so let's talk for a little bit about sheep ticks, and I'll tell you, there's really no reason that anybody needs to be bothered by sheep ticks. Have you all had them treated for them?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing you need to know about KEDs or sheep ticks, first of all, is that they're not an arachnid, they're not a true tick, they're an insect. They have 6 legs, but they look like a tick until you count the legs. A true tick has 8, and these sheepheads have 6. And if you find these crawly things attached to your sheep, it's probably a sheephead. And then the second thing you need to know about sheepheads, is that they are obligate parasites of sheep. They don't live anywhere else. They don't live like real ticks. They don't live on vegetation and then drop off. Sheep don't get them from the soil. They only get them from other sheep. You can't, if you don't have them in your flock, you're not going to get them unless you bring sheep in that has some. So, and if you do, then they'll go everywhere, and then you'll have them. So I just want to tell you, 3 years ago, well, many years ago, after I started shearing up in Aberdeen, I told Pat and Melendez, I said, well, I sheared for a bunch of people this year up in Aberdeen. He immediately said, did you see kids? I said, I saw a lot of kids. And he said, up around Aberdeen, he said, they are just notorious for not treating kids, for all the sheep being full of kids. And so, and they were. You get up to Aberdeen and everybody's got sheep kids, and they just ignore them. But this one guy, 3 years ago, he was just really grossed out by them, just really grossed out. So I told him how to treat for kids, and unlike everybody else, he nodded his head and said, okay. But then he went home and did it. And so I've got this one job in Aberdeen, and I go up there and I have different people come with their sheep, and we unload them, and then I just shear sheep for a couple of days with lots of different people. But they each unload their sheep so they don't commingle. So we get one group done, loaded, and the next group unloads, and then I shear those. So they don't commingle. Anyway, he did that. And he came back the next year, ticks every sheep, and then we got to his, not one. And so they're easy to control. So I'm going to show you how.
Are they found on other species?
No,
So they're not human?
no. So if you have them, like when I shear an infestation of them, so I'll walk away and I'll find them on me. And they try to embed, they try to latch, and so I feel them, but they can't. So I feel them, and I find one, and I pick it off and throw it out the window, because I'm usually driving home. I throw it out the window. Once in a while, I'll find one in the house where I put my dirty clothes after I've been shearing. And then sometimes when I've done laundry, I found a dead one. So they can't attach to humans. They don't do anything, not to dogs, not anything else. Only sheep. So they're really funny that way, and because they're insects, they're not hard. They're not hard to take care of. So this is best done right after they were shorn. The wool is short. But one time I had sheep kids, and I was well-meaning, and I think I treated, you have to do them all at once. You have to get rid of all the kids all at once. You have to do it all at once. But I think I was well-meaning, and I didn't get them all done, and I brought some in. I don't remember what happened. Anyway, I needed to get them all done, and some have been shorn and some haven't been. So I just treated everybody, even those with the full fleece. I treated them all. And I never had another kid. So even under the full fleece, I still got them. So this is permethrin, and you can buy this at the feed store, Tractor Supply, anywhere. And this used to be really, really cheap. This jar used to cost about $6, and I think it might cost 10 or 15 now. So it's still not expensive. And be sure to read the directions when you get it. But I think, if I remember right, that the directions say 1 ounce per 1 gallon of water to treat the surface of your animals. And so when you buy this container, you take the lid off this chamber, you leave the lid on the main chamber, and then when you squeeze the bottle, and this top is on, it squeezes the fluid up this tube and into this holding cup, and you can measure it. It's really cool. And so you squeeze it and you measure an ounce into here, and then you take that ounce, and you've got your gallon container waiting. And it's not a bad idea to maybe have half full of water. So you've got an old milk jug or windshield wiper fluid jug or a 1 gallon jug, a little bit of water, and you dump that ounce in. And you can even dose a little heavier if you want. I don't think I would go to more than 1.5 times their dose. Anyway, put it in that gallon that's about half filled with water. And then you've already been to the store and you found the very cheapest dishwashing fluid you can find. And it's usually about the size of a bottle, but if it's more, it's all right. And so you take this bottle and you take the lid off and you dump the whole thing into the water and the permethrin. You dump it all in, dump the whole thing in. And then you add water to fill it up to 1 gallon. So in that gallon, you've got soap, you've got permethrin, and you've got water. But now you've got an empty jar here. And so you get it all mixed up, and then you pour it into this empty jar, and then you just use that to squirt down the top line of your sheep. And dose them fairly heavy. The soap will make the fluid penetrate the wool down to the skin. So it'll flow down the wool and onto the skin, and it's really, really very, very effective. And you'll have to do it probably only once. If you see another one, just treat them again. It's cheap, it's easy, and really effective. So that's KEDS. Now, one of the cool things about ivermectin is that it also is active internally. It will act on your ectoparasites. So I dosed sheep one time I had kids. This was before I got them all with the permethrin. Years ago, I dewormed my ewes with ivermectin, and I knew I had some KEDS, and I came out about 3 days later, and there were dead KEDS on the surface of the wool of those ewes because the ivermectin had killed them.
Oh, wow.
So ivermectin is good that way, but I don't think you can rely on ivermectin to just wipe and clean like you can with permethrin. The permethrin really and truly will get every one of them, kill them all, and then you're completely done with it. Now, having said that, ivermectin can be used topically as well. So I've used it when I found like a patch. I was shearing, and this one place, and they had scabies in the sheep. So they had mange, and it was up on the head, around the base of the horns, and she'd been treating with something and it wasn't gone. And so mange or scabies is a reportable disease because it's transmissible to humans. So it's reportable. And so I told her that by law she should report that. And so I told her how to treat for it. And I said, I'm not going to say anything, but if this doesn't do it, all you got to do is report it. But you can take ivermectin and use it as a topical if you have just a spot of mange. It's not real widespread. You can put that. Use it. You can do it with your fingers and be safe, but I would use a glove. Use a glove, and you can smear it around on that patch of mange, and it'll kill the mites that
Just
are causing
straight?
scabies.
Just use it straight.
Yeah. Yeah, so I had this, ivermectin is what is the active ingredient for HeartGuard, for heartworms in dogs. So I've known people that just go buy ivermectin and treat their dogs. You need to know that the herding breeds of dogs are really sensitive to ivermectin and you can kill them. If you give them a dose from the label, you can kill these herding breeds of dogs with ivermectin. But this is what I wanted to tell you. I've got these border collies, and I get true ticks, the dog ticks. These dogs will get it once in a while. And I had one, and she just, it was as though she went out sniffing for ticks and found them all. And so she was always coming back, and I'd scratch her ears and I'd find a tick. And a true tick, not a sheep cat, a true tick. And then I would find that tick, and I would grab it and I'd pluck it, and it would hurt. It hurt her, and she'd flinch. And so she finally got so she didn't like me messing with her because I'd find a tick and I'd pull it and it would hurt. So I quit doing that with dogs. And so now what I do when I find a tick, because it happens often early and I don't know if I've got a bunch or not. So I'll take my ivermectin, and I'll take one of these little 1 cc syringes, and I'll use a needle, and I'll pull up like a tenth of a cc of ivermectin, take the needle off, and then just squirt it on top of that tick on the dog. Just squirt it on top of that one tick, and then it'll be gone in 3 or 4 days. It'll kill that tick and it'll be gone. But I don't give the ivermectin orally, systemically to the dog, to these border collies. So bot flies. Do you know what? So there are 2 kinds of bots that we have here. We have nasal bots, and we have the bots that get on the skin. I see bot fly. I see an abscess caused by a bot fly on the surface of sheep when I shear them. I see them regularly, and I see them in some places more than other places, and I see them sometimes on one particular sheep more than other sheep. I'll find them. So these regular bot flies lay eggs on the surface of the animal. The larvae, when the eggs hatch, the larvae burrow in and embed in the skin. And as they grow, they keep this little cavern in the skin, and they leave a little hole in the top to breathe. And so there's a little hole, and YouTube has lots of bot fly films if you would like to watch that. So you find when they're alive, you find this round spot, kind of feels like a big huge mosquito bite, but there's a little hole in the top, and then down inside there is usually a live fat maggot, bot fly maggot, and you can go in there with a forceps and pull it out. But sometimes they die before they emerge. So they pupate in that little cavern in the skin, and then when they're all done, they crawl out and fly away. And usually the animal will heal, but sometimes they don't. And then that little hole gets infected, and pus gathers there. And so when I shear, I find these abscesses on sheep left over from bots. And so that's something to be aware of. Your permethrin will take care of the bot flies if you have them. It'll kill the bots if you've got them. And that ivermectin will kill them. You could put a spot of ivermectin in one of those little botfly larvae, that would kill them. I mean, that's so you could treat the whole animal with permethrin, or you could pick them out. Like I found one in a dog one time, and I just treated that one bot that was in the dog. And I don't remember whether I pulled the bot or whether I killed it. I don't remember how I did it. But it depends how bad it is, whether you treat the whole animal with a drench like that or one at a time. But there's another bot, and it crawls into the nose of the animals, lays eggs, and then the larvae crawl up through the sinuses, and they will often lodge at the base of the horns, because there's a whole bunch of blood that flows at the base of the horns, on the inside of the horn. And there's not a real great way to deal with that, other than ivermectin, and that would have to be an injected dose, an internal dose.
Not oral. Injected.
For that, I would inject it. And I didn't mention that with ivermectin in sheep, you can give it orally. I think it's a little less effective if you give it orally than injected.
So if they've expelled a nasal bot, at that point, you give them ivermectin or it's a moot point.
No, I would give them ivermectin, because there's probably more.
I had a sheep, oh my God.
Yeah.
I've seen them expel nasal bots, that's the most disgusting thing in the world. But
Yeah.
I had one, and I was outside, and she had green slime all up her head, and I'm like, oh my God, my sheep's dying, I freaked out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she just expelled the nasal bot, and she was fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but ivermectin is what you want to get.
Yeah, that's what I would do, because that'll circulate through the system.
Okay,
And so
I didn't
So
know.
if-
It's hard to find information on what to do with the nasal bot.
yeah, it is, because there's not a great way to do it. And in fact, as I was preparing, I got reading some of my old books. I have some old books from like the early 1900s, and they recommend you take a feather and you tickle their nose to cause them to do more extra sneezing, coughing and
And
sneezing.
sneeze it out.
Yeah, that was their recommendation.
Oh,
One
wow.
of the recommendations. So that's nasal bots. And we talked about mites, scabies mites. They will be affected on the surface by injected ivermectin again, but we can get them with permethrin too, the mites, scabies. And that's what I wound up doing for that woman where I found scabies on her rams. We treated both with ivermectin, and then we gave them the permethrin drench on the surface. I've got maggots addressed here, just plain maggots, and that happens when you have regular flies, and you might have a buildup of manure on an undocked ewe if you leave tails on. It's full of urine and manure, and the flies will lay an egg. Then the maggots start to eat the skin of the sheep. Or if you have a wound that you don't see underneath the wool, flies will find it, lay eggs, and you get maggots in your wool. And you just have to clean those out from the surface.
Is it just like fly strike?
That's what fly strike
Okay.
is. Yes. Yeah, same thing. Lice, lice were mentioned in this book. In this book, she mentions lice. I don't think I've ever run across lice on sheep. But in some places, it might be bad, but I don't think you need to worry about it unless you have them housed with Angora goats. With Angora goats, I've never seen an Angora goat without lice.
Oh.
They all have lice. And so most people treat them once a year at shearing, but those lice on those Angora goats, they just come back from the soil. They're always infested. The next year, they always have them.
So is the fleece full of lice?
Some, but I think by the time they process it, they're dead.
Oh.
So, but yeah, no, when I bag it up, there's lice in the fleece. And I go home, I don't like Angora goats. I go home and take a shower.
They're pretty.
I don't even like to, I don't like them at all. But I share a lot of them, so. I wanted to mention this. There's an emerging problem on the border with Mexico and Texas with the screwworm. It's coming back, and that screwworm was eradicated back in the 60s, I think. In the 1960s, we eradicated screwworm, but it's on its way back. And so, people are watching for it, and they're trying to get back down into southern Texas and get it under control. But they also look like a maggot. But if you see something and you don't know what it is, and there's an infestation and you suspect screwworm, it ought to be reported so that the public health authorities can get on top of that.
Didn't they say they got like a red head on them too? Did you
Yeah.
hear that?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. So, with this problem, I was contacted by Livestock Board to ask if I'd ever seen them. And I haven't. I've never encountered them that I know of at this point.
Who do you call? When you have to
The Livestock Board, New Mexico Livestock Board.
Oh, okay.
So what I've done on the back here, and I'm gonna quit with, I'm gonna just mention on that scabies stuff. I mentioned permethrin, I mentioned ivermectin. You can sometimes just coat it with an oil of some sort. Sometimes you can do that and get rid of it if the infestation isn't too big, and that will smother the lice. So now come to the back, and I've listed some websites, including the New Mexico Livestock Board. So I've got their website there. I've listed, on all these medications and these species of parasites, I use Wikipedia a lot. They have some really good information on these biological organisms. So I put the website for Valley Vet. That's the commercial veterinary supply mail order place. I've listed next New Mexico Livestock Board, and also in conjunction with the Livestock Board, I've mentioned U.S. Department of Agriculture Veterinary Services. They also are a good resource for stockmen, and especially for emerging problems, emerging diseases, and for emerging problems that can disrupt markets. So both the Livestock Board and USDA, their ultimate mission is to protect livestock commerce and agriculture in general in the United States. The American sheep industry, they have a lot of good information and good resources. They exist to support wool growers, and that's where you make it with wool. I think that comes through them. So I've listed also here, Maryland has kept for a long time a large resource to support the producers of small ruminants. They've got a lot of information, and it's really good. So that's worth looking at. It's a good resource, the Maryland Small Ruminant Program. And then I list this book here. And then as I was driving down here, I remembered a website that I forgot to put on. And do you know what the Merck Veterinary Manual is? You know what that is? It's all online, so you can access it online. But it's if you have the paper copy, it's a book just a little bit smaller than this, but it's about that.
Okay.
And it has veterinary information. It's for veterinarians. It's on diseases and conditions of a broad species of animals that veterinarians run into. A really, really good resource, and you can get it free online if you want. Or
The manual? You can get the manual free?
Yeah, because I kept a paper copy, and what I read online, it's the manual. You can get everything in the manual and the paper manual online, and it's easy to get. The paper manual is easier for me to read, but if you want to search a lot of things and get to the information fast, then the online version of the manual works really well. And the information is probably more current electronically, but it's a really good resource. And it's one you should consult and kind of have at your fingertips. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is that I try to keep notes. So I filled up a couple of these. So whenever I deworm everything, or the other day I went out and did an inventory of the sheep recorded out, your tag numbers, put your tags in those that you. So it's a good idea to keep a record of what you do. Marlers, you keep records because we go out and when I'm sharing, you have your doses all written out and listed and record that. And that can be handy because you might not remember in 6 months what you did.
You can't remember by the end.
Right.
Well, yeah, when you have a lot, yeah.
So that's all I have.
Kerry, thank you so very, very much.
Yeah,
We
you're
appreciate you.
welcome.